The sunlight over Seattle fell like golden silk weaving through the glass windows of the Johnson family's suburban home. It was the kind of day that seemed almost scripted: clear skies, a soft breeze, neighbors mowing their lawns, children laughing down the street. For Clara Johnson, the brightness outside mirrored the storm of joy inside her. A small plastic stick rested in her purse, folded neatly between her sketchbook and worn-out wallet. The pregnancy test. 2 pink lines. Proof of the miracle she had prayed for through 3 long years of marriage with Gilbert Miller. Clara was not the type to believe in omens, but this felt like heaven's smile finally reaching her. She had rehearsed the moment in her head 100 times, telling her parents, watching their eyes brim with pride, and then Gilbert's face lit up with something warmer than his usual stern indifference. Perhaps this would be the gift that stitched their fraying love back together. As she pulled into the driveway, her hands tightened on the steering wheel. The Johnson family backyard was alive with laughter, the grill already smoking a weekend barbecue, just another tradition. Except for Clara, this one was different. Today, she would tell them all. Her mother, Pearl, was the first to notice her. "Clara," she exclaimed, rising from the picnic table to kiss her daughter's cheek. Her father, Lester, followed with a half smile, half sigh. "You kept us waiting," he said, the words dipped in that familiar tone of mild disapproval. "Your husband's been here for nearly an hour." Clara smiled faintly, brushing the hair from her face. "I got caught up at work, Dad. Deadlines don't wait. You should know by now what comes first: family, not work. You're a wife, Clara, not some single artist anymore." The sting was sharp, but she swallowed it. It wasn't new. Her parents had never quite understood why she pursued murals instead of nursing or business like her cousin. She sat down at the table, glancing at Gilbert across from her. He didn't defend her. He didn't even meet her eyes. It has been like this lately. His silence is louder than any argument. But today would be different. Clara held on to that thought like a lifeline. Today she would give them all news so radiant it would close their eyes to every past failure. Pearl excused herself to fetch dessert. Lester chatted with Gilbert about landscaping projects, leaving Clara to sip her lemonade quietly. She caught herself smiling. How would Gilbert look when she told him he would finally be a father? Would he hold her? Would the coldness melt? She never got to find out. The squealing delight broke the air as her mother's voice rose inside the house. "Lindsay. Oh, sweetheart." Clara's heart stuttered. Lindsay Carter, her cousin, her parents' golden girl. Within seconds, Pearl and Lester rushed to the gate like children, their arms flung wide to welcome her. And then Gilbert, her husband, stood. He too leaned in, smiling, as Lindsay stepped gracefully into the yard. Clara froze, her fingers curling tight around the edge of the tablecloth. Lindsay was glowing as always. Blonde hair in soft waves, skin flawless, her white dress fluttering in the breeze. She was a model in Los Angeles, often gracing magazines that Clara had seen at airport stands. And here she was striding into Clara's home, effortlessly stealing every gaze, including Gilbert's. Clara stood, reluctantly forcing politeness. "Hi, cousin." "Oh, Clara." Lindsay's voice was honey-laced with venom. Her gaze flicked to Clara's hand, then her bare ring finger. "You're not wearing your wedding band." Clara lifted the chain around her neck, where her ring dangled. "I turned it into a pendant. It gets in the way when I paint." "Oh, right, still painting murals." Lindsay smiled sweetly. "That's cute. I just wrapped a cover shoot for Vogue. Being the face of a global brand is exhausting, but someone has to do it." The words stabbed deeper than they should have. Clara forced a smile. She knew this game. Lindsay had been playing it since they were girls. Extrovert against introvert, golden child against invisible one. Her mother's voice cut in. "Clara, help me bring the food inside, will you? It's too hot out here. Clara obeyed, her chest tight. Already she could feel the script of the day slipping away. The meal moved indoors. Conversation flowed like wine, mostly around Lindsay's glamorous life in L.A. Clara sat quietly, stealing glances at Gilbert. When their fingers brushed under the table, he pulled away, not harshly but distant, like he had more critical hands to hold. Then Lindsay clasped her palms together, her smile radiant. There's something I want to share with everyone. She paused dramatically. I'm pregnant. The room erupted in cheers. Her mother cried. Her father clapped his hands. Even Gilbert smiled, handing Lindsay a glass of water like a doting partner. The fork slipped from Clara's hand, clattering against the plate. Her stomach twisted. This was supposed to be her moment, her joy. But now it would look like she was copying, competing, clinging for scraps of attention. She pressed a hand over her belly, whispering to herself, Tomorrow I'll tell them. But the laughter around her drowned even the sound of her heartbeat. That night, silence filled the car ride home. Gilbert drove, eyes locked on the road, his jaw set. Clara stared out the window, memories rushing like ghosts. Childhood summers, where Lindsay danced in talent shows, while Clara hid with her sketchbook. College years, when her parents bragged about Lindsay's nursing studies, while dismissing Clara's art as a hobby. Now here she was, 3 years married, finally pregnant, finally ready to step into the light, and once again, Lindsay had stolen it first. Gilbert's phone buzzed on the console. Clara's eyes flicked down. The name on the screen is Lindsay Carter. Gilbert grabbed it quickly, answering with a too soft, too intimate tone. Hey, did you like my surprise? Clara's chest hollowed. Her fingers trembled as she pressed against the leather seat. What surprise? She asked when he hung up. Nothing important. He accelerated onto the freeway, his knuckles white on the wheel. Don't start imagining things, Clara. Not tonight. Her throat closed, but her mind screamed. Something is happening between them. I can feel it. The test in her purse seemed heavier now, mocking her hope. Hours later, Clara lay awake in their quiet suburban home. Gilbert's side of the bed was cold, his breathing shallow beside her. She touched the test again under the pillow, whispering to herself, You will be my reason to fight, my reason to stay strong. But just as sleep began to pull her under, she heard a muffled vibration. Gilbert's phone again glowing in the dark. She leaned slightly, just enough to see the name across the screen. Lindsay Carter, again, at midnight. Gilbert shifted, taking the call, as he slipped quietly into the hallway. Clara's chest heaved. Tears pricked her eyes. She wasn't just imagining things. The threads of betrayal were already tightening around her. And tomorrow, the storm would break. The morning after the barbecue, Seattle lay beneath a quiet drizzle. The city had a way of cloaking itself in mist, turning even bright houses into blurred silhouettes. Clara stood at the kitchen counter, watching raindrops gather on the glass. The untouched cup of coffee beside her had long gone cold. Gilbert descended the stairs, crisp in his tailored suit, tie knotted perfectly. He smelled faintly of cedar and cologne, expensive and impersonal. You're not eating? She asked, her voice careful, almost too thorough. I've got a meeting downtown. He checked his watch without looking at her. Big client. Can't be late. Clara bit back the instinct to remind him she had something important to share. But the thought of last night, the cheers for Lindsay, the phone call in the dark, pressed against her ribs like a blade. So she only nodded. Drive safe. He left with a distracted, the door closing firmly behind him. The silence afterward was crushing. Later that evening, Clara spread her sketches across the living room floor. She had a mural commission from an elementary school, a project that mattered, one that could be her proudest work yet. She painted children leaping across walls of color, their faces bright with imagination. Yet her own hands trembled. Her mind wandered back to Gilbert's fleeting smiles at Lindsay, to the way her parents had lit up for her cousin, while barely glancing at Clara. She whispered aloud, as if the walls could listen. I should tell him. Tonight. When the front door opened, she turned eagerly. But Gilbert entered with the heavy air of exhaustion, tossing his briefcase onto the couch. "How was work?" she asked, gathering courage. "Long. I need a shower." "Wait." She rose quickly, clutching the folded sonogram appointment card she'd been hiding all day. "I have something." Her words died. His phone buzzed, vibrating against the glass coffee table. The name flashed bright in the dim room. Lindsay. Gilbert's jaw clenched. He snatched the phone before Clara could blink. "Business," he muttered, already walking away. "Don't start." The tension carried into the weekend. Gilbert suggested a drive to the coast, claiming it would clear the air. Clara agreed, desperate for a moment of closeness. For a while, the Pacific Northwest unfolded in serene beauty. Evergreen forests, winding highways, the occasional glimpse of ocean. Clara almost let herself believe this was a new beginning. Then his phone lit up again. She saw the name. Again. "Pull over," she said quietly. He didn't. Gilbert stopped the car. His knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. "Not this again. Why does she keep calling you?" Her voice broke, despite her effort to sound calm. "At midnight in the morning now. Tell me the truth." He laughed bitterly, pressing harder on the gas. "Do you hear yourself? You sound paranoid." "Paranoid!" Clara's nails dug into her palms. "She's my cousin, my family, and she's enough." His shout cracked through the cabin. Rain began to fall harder, the wipers swiping frantically. "You don't get to interrogate me every time my phone rings. You think being married means you own every piece of me. You don't." The car swerved slightly, tires hissing against wet asphalt. Clara's heart pounded as fear tangled with fury. "I don't want to own you," she whispered. "I want to know you're still mine." But Gilbert's eyes stayed locked on the storm ahead. Back home, silence stretched like barbed wire. Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain drum on the roof. She thought of the tiny heartbeat growing inside her, her secret hope. Would Gilbert even care when he knew? Or would he dismiss it as another inconvenience, another demand on his carefully controlled life? By morning, she had resolved no more waiting. She would tell him tonight, no matter what. But evening came, and with it another empty seat at dinner. The clock ticked past 10:09. At 11, Gilbert finally stumbled in, smelling faintly of whiskey. "Where were you?" she asked, voice trembling. "Clients," he said flatly, shrugging off his coat. "Clients don't call at midnight," she shot back before she could stop herself. His eyes flashed. "Here we go again." "Then prove me wrong," she pleaded. "Please show me your phone." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. He turned away, pocketing the device as if it were treasure, and that was answer enough. 2 days later, Clara sought solace in her mural work at the elementary school. The walls of the gymnasium filled with bright blues and yellows under her brush laughter, echoing from the playground outside. Here, she could breathe. She could remember who she was before betrayal and suspicion corroded her. The sun was sharp overhead when a shadow fell across her canvas. "Need an umbrella." She turned and froze. Standing there taller than she remembered, with the easy grin of familiarity, was Dean Anderson, her childhood friend, her one-time partner in everything before college pulled them apart. Dean. Her brush clattered to the floor, paint splattering across her shoes. "You're back. 8 years is long enough." He laughed, warm and unguarded. "I almost didn't recognize you." Except you still wrinkle your nose when you're concentrating. Clara felt something shift inside her. For the first time in months, maybe years, she laughed a real laugh. Dean offered his umbrella against the merciless sun. His presence felt like oxygen in a room she hadn't realized was suffocating. That evening, Clara returned home lighter. Her spirit briefly lifted. But Gilbert noticed. "You seem happy," he said, his tone edged with suspicion. "I saw an old friend." She tried to keep it casual. "Dean. He just got back from San Francisco." Gilbert's jaw tightened. "Dean Anderson." "That guy." She raised an eyebrow. "You remember him?" "How could I forget? Always hovering around you and always waiting for me to mess up." He smirked without humor. Guess his patience paid off. Clara's chest tightened. It wasn't like that. He was just kind. Kind. Gilbert repeated the word, dripping with disdain. "Right. While you accuse me of cheating, you run back to your high school crush." The irony sliced her open. "Don't you dare turn this on me," she snapped. "You've been hiding things, Gilbert. You know it. I know it. We both feel it." He didn't answer. He just left the room, phone in hand, door slamming shut. Clara stood frozen, the silence roaring louder than thunder. That night, she dreamt of 2 lines on a test. Of small feet running across painted murals. Of laughter that belonged to her and Gilbert. When she woke, the dream turned to ash. From the hallway, faint whispers seeped through the closed office door. Gilbert's voice low and urgent, and another voice muffled but unmistakable. "Lindsay." Clara pressed her back to the wall, her breath shallow. The house suddenly felt foreign, dangerous, like a stage where she had been cast as the fool. The pregnancy test lay hidden in her drawer, waiting for the right moment. But that moment had passed. Now all she had left was the storm gathering in her chest, ready to break. The Johnson dining room smelled of roasted turkey and rosemary. The long mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier crystal glasses, reflecting amber light. On the surface, it was an ordinary Sunday dinner, the kind Pearl Johnson cherished, family-gathered food, abundant laughter filling the air. But the laughter felt borrowed to Clara, like someone else's life echoing inside her childhood home. She sat at the far end of the table, her fork untouched, her gaze drifting between Gilbert and Lindsay. They were seated too close. Always too close. Pearl fussed over Lindsay's plate, adding a second helping of mashed potatoes. "You must eat, darling. 2 lives depend on it now." Lester chuckled, raising his glass, a child in the family at last. "God has finally blessed us." Clara's throat tightened. Her hand slid beneath the table, instinctively resting on her belly. The child she carried, her child, was erased before it even had a chance to be announced. She inhaled, ready to speak. "Tonight. They have to know tonight." But Lindsay's voice, smooth as silk, cut through. "Thank you, Uncle Lester. I couldn't have made it without Gilbert. He's been so supportive." The words fell like knives. Gilbert shifted in his seat, not denying it, not even glancing at his wife. Clara placed her napkin down, palms trembling. Supportive, she repeated, her tone deceptively calm. "Interesting choice of words, Lindsay. Would you like to explain what that means exactly?" The room stilled. Forks hovered midair. Lindsay smiled sweetly, pressing a hand to her stomach. "I meant nothing more than kindness. Gilbert has been there when I needed help." "Isn't that right?" Gilbert cleared his throat, eyes darting to Lester. "She's family." "Clara, don't twist it." Pearl frowned at her daughter. "Clara, enough. This is not the time for your dramatics. Be happy for your cousin. She is giving us something you haven't." The air cracked. Clara's heart pounded like a trapped bird. "Something I haven't." Her voice wavered. "I'm your daughter. And She stopped herself, her secret pressed against her ribs. If she said it now, it would sound like desperation, a counterattack against Lindsay's spotlight. She couldn't let her child be born into suspicion, so she swallowed it back, tears burning her eyes. Lester's voice cut the silence. Clara, don't make this about you. You've always been sensitive. But this is bigger than you. It's about family, about legacy. Legacy? Clara laughed bitterly. You mean heirs. You mean bloodlines. You mean you'd rather pin your hopes on Lindsay than believe in me. Pearl set her fork down sharply. Please stop it. You're embarrassing yourself. And you. Clara turned to Gilbert, her eyes ablaze. What are you doing? Smiling at her like she's the one who belongs at your side. Do you think I don't notice? Gilbert's jaw flexed. You're imagining things. No, Clara whispered, her voice breaking. I'm seeing them. Clearer than ever. The conversation resumed awkwardly, as if Clara's outburst could be buried beneath clinking glasses and feigned laughter. But for her, the room had changed. Every smile from her parents was no longer warmth. It was betrayal. Every glance between Gilbert and Lindsay was proof. She pushed food around her plate, barely tasting it. Her father discussed property investments, and her mother discussed Lindsay's modeling contracts. Gilbert chimed in occasionally, his voice soft, almost intimate, whenever he spoke directly to Lindsay. Clara might as well have been invisible. By dessert, she could bear no more. She excused herself, claiming work to finish, and slipped into the hallway. Her reflection in the mirror startled her, pale skin, hollow eyes, the look of someone fading out of her story. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but as she passed the half-open kitchen door, voices drifted out. Lindsay's. Gilbert's. She's fragile, Lindsay was saying, her tone almost mocking. You have to be patient with her. Gilbert sighed. She suspects. Last night she demanded to see my phone. And Lindsay teased. I didn't let her. A pause. Then softer, almost tender. I couldn't risk it. The world tilted. Clara clutched the wall for balance. Her parents' voices joined in moments later. Gilbert Pearl said warmly, Don't be too hard on her. She was always tricky, always chasing foolish dreams. But we trust you to do what's right for this family. Yes, Lester added. Please, think of the child. Of Lindsay's child. Clara's breath caught. A sob threatened to break, but she smothered it with her hand. When she finally returned to the dining room, the table was half cleared. Gilbert was chuckling at something Lindsay whispered. Pearl was humming as she gathered plates. Clara, her father called, came and sat as if nothing had happened. We'll make coffee. She looked at all of them, and something inside her snapped. No, she said. Her voice shook, but it carried. I won't sit at this table and pretend I belong here. The room fell silent. You want Lindsay? She continued, her eyes blazing with unshed tears. You want her child? Then have her. But don't expect me to keep smiling while you erase me. Gilbert stood abruptly. Clara. But she was already at the door. Her purse clutched like armor, her steps unsteady but determined. The night air hit her like ice as she stumbled to her car. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to escape. Rain slicked the roads as she sped through Seattle's quiet streets. Her vision blurred not from the storm, but from tears. The test lay hidden in her bag. 2 pink lines. Proof of life. Evidence of her truth. But it felt like nothing at that moment, because no one believed in her. Not her husband. Not her parents. Not even herself. She drove faster, and the wipers barely kept up. The city lights smeared into streaks of gold and red. And a new voice began to rise somewhere in the hollow of her chest. A voice colder, sharper. If they won't fight for me, I will fight for myself, even if it means destroying everything they hold dear. Her phone buzzed in the passenger seat. She glanced down. A message from an unknown number. Clara, you don't know me, but I know what they're doing to you. Meet me tomorrow. Alone. Her hands tightened on the wheel. The storm outside raged, but inside her, a greater storm still began to form. Seattle's skies were gray again, the endless gray that pressed down on the soul. Clara had not slept. She sat curled on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tightly around the small ultrasound appointment card she never got to use. Gilbert lay beside her, his back turned, his breathing steady, as if the world had not cracked open the night before. The message from the unknown number still lingered on her phone. She hadn't replied. She didn't dare. But the words glowed in her memory. I know what they're doing to you. Meet me tomorrow. Alone. Who could it be? Someone from Gilbert's firm. A neighbor, or worse. Another person tangled in Lindsay's orbit. Clara pressed the card against her lips, whispering, "Hold on. Just hold on for me." But her body trembled with unease, as though it already knew what her heart refused to admit. By breakfast, Gilbert was gone. He hadn't said goodbye, hadn't even left a note. Only his half-drunk coffee mug stood as proof he'd been there. Clara forced herself to eat a slice of toast. She needed strength for the baby. But every bite felt like ash. At the elementary school, the mural waited. Colors, bright children's faces painted in strokes of joy. She worked with feverish energy brush, moving across the wall, as if she could paint herself whole again. By noon, her vision blurred. The ladder shook beneath her. She climbed down, carefully clutching her stomach. A dull ache pulsed low in her abdomen, steady, insistent. Not now, she whispered. Please, not now. A familiar shadow fell across her work. You're pushing too hard again. She turned. Dean Anderson stood at the edge of the gym, sleeves rolled to his elbows, holding 2 bottles of water. His smile was gentle, but his eyes, those deep, steady eyes, studied her with quiet concern. Clara blinked back tears. Dean, what are you doing here? Checking in. He handed her a bottle. Word gets around fast in this city. I heard about the dinner, about Lindsay. Her stomach clenched. Of course you did. You don't have to go through this alone. I'm fine, she lied, though the ache sharpened. Dean tilted his head, unconvinced. You don't look fine. You look like someone who's been carrying too much for too long. For a fleeting moment, she imagined leaning into him, telling him everything, the calls, the betrayal, the secret life growing inside her. But she pulled back, swallowing the urge. I'll manage. Hours later, Clara stood before the finished mural, exhaustion heavy on her bones. The children in her painting looked alive, free, untouched by betrayal. As she packed her brushes, another wave of pain surged through her body, fiercer this time. She gasped, doubling over. The world tilted, the gym spinning in circles. She stumbled outside into the sharp Seattle rain, desperate for air. Clara. A voice shouted. Dean's voice. She collapsed onto the pavement, hands clutching her stomach. Warmth spread beneath her fingers, not the comfort of life, but the terror of blood. No, she sobbed. Please, not this. Dean was at her side in seconds, his arms strong around her trembling frame. Stay with me, Clara. Stay awake. But her vision blurred, darkness closing in. The antiseptic sting of a hospital room greeted her when she woke. Machines hummed softly. A nurse adjusted the IV in her arm. Dean sat beside her bed, his face drawn, his eyes shadowed by sleepless worry. Clara, he whispered. Her throat tightened. The baby Dean's silence was answer enough. His gaze faltered, and she felt the truth in her bones. Her world was shattered. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, no, no." Dean reached for her hand, but she pulled away, pressing her palms to her face. The sobs came, then raw, unstoppable. She cried for the life she lost, for the child she would never hold, for the innocence ripped away by betrayal. When the storm of tears finally quieted, she whispered into the silence, "It was all I had left. And now," Dean leaned forward, his voice rough, "you still have yourself, and you have me." Later that evening, the door opened. Gilbert entered, a bouquet of lilies in hand. He looked immaculate, as if he were arriving for a meeting rather than to grieve. "Clara," he said softly, setting the flowers on the table. "I'm sorry." Her body stiffened. "Sorry," he sighed. "I didn't want this to happen, but maybe it's for the best. You were under so much stress. Perhaps this is God's way of telling us something." Clara's blood ran cold. "For the best? You and we've been struggling for a while. And now with Lindsay." Her hand shot out, grabbing the water glass from the table. She hurled it across the room, shattering it against the wall. "Don't you dare say her name here," she screamed. "You did this, Gilbert. You and your lies. You took everything from me." For a moment, Gilbert's mask cracked. His jaw clenched. His eyes flickered with something almost guilty. Then just as quickly the mask returned. "I'll give you time," he muttered and left. Dean stepped inside, seconds later. Fury etched on his face. "If he ever comes back here, I swear." Clara cut him off with a whisper, her voice like steel. "No, he won't take anything else from me. From now on, it's my turn." That night, Clara lay awake staring at the ceiling, her heart a hollow cavern. She pressed her hand against the emptiness of her stomach, tears sliding silently into her hair. But beneath the grief, something darker stirred. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was a purpose. She saw her parents' dismissive faces and heard their voices praising Lindsay while condemning her. She saw Gilbert's hand brushing Lindsay's, the secret glances, the midnight calls. She saw the child she had lost, erased before its first breath. They had stolen her joy. They had stolen her family. But they would not steal her will. Slowly, she turned her head toward the chair where Dean had fallen asleep, his hand still near hers, as if guarding her even in dreams. For the first time, she felt the faintest flicker of strength. "I will not be the victim anymore." At dawn, the nurse brought her phone. Clara hesitated before turning it on. The screen lit up with one unread message, the same unknown number. "Now you understand. They took from you what can never be replaced. Let me help you take everything from them." Her pulse quickened. She read the words again and again, her mind racing. Was it dangerous? Almost certainly, but so was silence. She closed her eyes, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. The world had thought her broken, but broken glass cuts deeper than any blade. The rain had finally stopped leaving. Seattle drenched in silver morning light. Clara sat by the hospital window, her gown hanging loose on her shoulders. Outside, the streets glistened like rivers of glass. Inside, she felt hollow, emptied of everything she once carried. The nurse had offered her breakfast, but she couldn't eat. All she could taste was loss. Dean walked in when the door opened. Not hurried, dramatic, or simply steady. He carried a paper bag and 2 steaming cups. "You didn't eat," he said, reading her face before she could speak. "I couldn't." "Then don't think of it as food," he replied, placing the bag on the tray. "Think of it as survival. 1 bite. For you. For the fight you don't know you're about to start." Clara's lips parted. "Fight." Dean's eyes met hers, unwavering. "Clara, I've seen men like Gilbert, smooth on the surface, rot underneath. If you stay quiet, they win. If you fight, you win. She swallowed her throat dry. I don't even know where to begin. Then let me help you, Dean said. His voice was low, steady like an oath. We'll begin together. Later that day, Clara signed her hospital discharge papers. Dean waited by the entrance holding her coat. She hesitated before slipping her arm into the sleeve. For 3 years, Gilbert had been the one to steady her. Now that role belonged to someone else. Silence stretched between them in the car, not uncomfortable but heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Clara broke it. Dean, what if I fail? What if I try and they crush me again? Dean's hands tightened on the wheel. You won't fail, because you're not the same woman anymore. Pain changes people, and you, Clara, you're learning to turn pain into fire. His words sank deep. For the first time since the miscarriage, she felt something stir inside her. Not joy, not hope, but a fierce flicker of determination. Days passed. Clara returned to her apartment, now painfully silent without Gilbert's presence. Yet silence also gave her space to think. She combed through old messages, receipts, and photos, searching for proof of his betrayal. One evening, Dean brought his laptop. I did some digging, he said. Your cousin Lindsay isn't as untouchable as she pretends. She's left trails, contracts, modeling gigs, late-night hotel bookings, and not all with Gilbert. Clara's breath caught. So it's true. Dean turned the screen toward her. Photos appeared. Lindsay was with wealthy business people, her smile polished, and her hands never far from theirs. Clara felt both sick and strangely alive. They need to see this. My parents. The world. Not yet, Dean cautioned. If you strike too early, they'll spin the story against you. We need more. Enough to burn every bridge she's built. Clara leaned back, heart pounding. For the first time, she wasn't the girl begging to be heard. She was the woman gathering weapons. As nights bled into mornings, Dean stayed close. Sometimes they spoke for hours about art business and the years they'd lost. Sometimes they sat in silence, his presence a comfort stronger than words. One evening, Clara painted in her studio. The mural she began was unlike any other. Darker tones, sharper strokes, a woman rising from flames. Dean watched quietly, leaning against the doorframe. You're painting yourself, he said softly. Clara paused, brush trembling. Am I? Yes. His gaze was steady. And you're beautiful. Even broken. Especially broken. Her chest tightened. For years, she had longed for Gilbert to say such words. He never had. And now here was Dean saying them, without hesitation, without agenda. She looked away, afraid of what her heart was beginning to feel. The following Sunday, Clara's phone rang. It was her mother. Clara Pearl's voice was sharp, impatient. You've avoided us long enough. Lindsay needs your support. She's carrying the future of this family. Clara froze. The future of this family. Yes. And Gilbert has been excellent through it all. We expect you to understand. He deserves happiness, even if it's not with you. Clara's hand shook, fury burning her veins. Mother, I lost a child because of him, because of you. And you dare call that my cousin's child? The future Pearl's silence on the other end was telling, cold, dismissive. Then came the final blow. Clara, don't dramatize. You were never strong enough for this life. Let Lindsay take your place. The line went dead. Clara stood in the middle of her apartment, phone slipping from her hand. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Dean found her minutes later, collapsed on the floor, shoulders shaking. He knelt, his arms around her, his voice a whisper against her hair. They've chosen their side, he said. Now it's time for you to choose yours. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She replayed her mother's words. Gilbert's indifference. Lindsay's smug smile. Something hardened inside her. She retrieved the mysterious texts from the unknown number. Whoever it was, they knew too much to ignore. She typed a reply for the first time. I'm listening. What do you have for me? Within minutes, a new message appeared. Meet me tomorrow. Pike Place Market. Noon. Come alone. Her pulse quickened. Fear and anticipation tangled inside her. Was this dangerous? Absolutely. But she was past the point of safety. She placed the phone down, staring at her reflection in the dark window. For the first time, she didn't see the invisible daughter, the neglected wife. She saw a woman sharpening her pain into a weapon. The next day, Dean insisted on driving her downtown. You're not going alone, he said. She hesitated. The message said, I don't care. I'll stay out of sight if I have to, but I'm not letting you walk into this without someone watching your back. Clara didn't argue. Part of her wanted him there, not just as protection, but as proof she wasn't as alone as they wanted her to believe. At noon, Pike Place Market buzzed with life tourists, crowding stalls, street musicians playing violins, the scent of fresh fish mingling with coffee. Clara moved through the chaos, her eyes scanning for someone who might know too much. Then she saw him. A man in a dark coat, leaning casually against the railing overlooking Elliott Bay. His face was partly hidden beneath a cap, but Clara felt a chill when his eyes met hers. You're late, he said. His voice was smooth, unfamiliar, but worth waiting for. Clara's heart raced. She didn't know if she was stepping into salvation or a trap. The man slipped an envelope into her hands. Inside, you'll find proof of Gilbert's betrayal and Lindsay's entire facade. Use it wisely. Clara stared, pulse hammering. Why are you helping me? His smile was thin, because some lies deserve to burn. And with that, he disappeared into the crowd, leaving her alone with the envelope that could change everything. Dean emerged moments later, eyes sharp. What did he give you? Clara clutched the envelope to her chest. A match, she whispered. Now all I need is fire. The envelope lay on Clara's desk like a living thing, its edges trembling in the draft from the half-open window. She had not opened it yet. Hours had passed since Pike Place Market, but still she couldn't bring herself to tear the seal. Dean leaned against the doorframe arms, crossed his gaze steady on her. You've been staring at it for 3 hours, he said. I know, Clara whispered. Her fingers brushed the paper. I'm afraid of what's inside, fearful of what it will make me. Dean stepped closer, his voice low. Clara, you've already changed. Whatever's in there is just fuel. You're the fire. Her breath trembled. Then with one sharp motion she tore the seal. Photographs spilled across the desk like shards of glass. In a velvet dress, Lindsay was stepping into a hotel suite with a man twice her age. Lindsay is laughing at a rooftop bar, her hand on another man's knee. Screenshots of messages explicit, damning, impossible to twist into innocence. Then the one that made Clara's stomach twist was Gilbert holding Lindsay close, his lips pressed to her ear, as if whispering promises meant for Clara alone. Her hands shook. She pressed one photo flat against the desk, her eyes burning. This is who they wanted me to step aside for. Dean's hand brushed hers, grounding her. Now you have proof. Proof your parents can't ignore. Proof the world can't ignore. Clara looked up at him, her tears sharp as diamonds. Then it's time they see the truth. They spread the photos across the table, arranging them like puzzle pieces. Too much at once will overwhelm them, Dean said, his voice calm but firm. If you show everything, they'll claim you fabricated it. We need precision. Strike at the right moment with the proper evidence. Clara nodded slowly, absorbing every word. So, we release them piece by piece. Exactly. Let the cracks appear. Let suspicion grow until no one can defend them. And when they're already crumbling, then you strike with everything. Her lips curved, not into a smile, but something colder, sharper. Like painting a mural. Layer by layer, until the image can't be denied. Dean's eyes softened. Except this time the canvas is justice. That weekend, Clara attended a family dinner at her parents' house. It was the first time since the hospital. The air was thick with tension, the table crowded with relatives. Lindsay sat at the center, radiant in silk, her hand resting theatrically on her stomach. Gilbert hovered nearby, ever the loyal shadow. Pearl's voice rang out. "We're so proud of Lindsay. She's carrying the future of this family." Clara's chest tightened, but she said nothing. Instead, she reached into her bag, pulling out a small envelope. With quiet precision, she slid it across the table to her father. "What's this?" Lester asked, frowning. "Open it," Clara said softly. Inside was a single photo Lindsay in the hotel suite, her lips pressed to the cheek of a well-known married senator in their community. The room fell silent. Forks clattered against plates. Eyes widened, darting from Clara to Lindsay. Lindsay laughed too quickly. "This is fake, obviously." But her cheeks flushed, her eyes betraying her. Pearl snapped Clara. "How dare you dare what?" Mother Clara's voice cut sharply through the air. "Dare to tell the truth? Or dare to stop being the family's scapegoat?" Finally. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of Gilbert clearing his throat, as if he could erase the image from everyone's mind. But the seed was planted. Back at her apartment, Clara sat on the balcony, the city lights flickering below. The night air smelled of rain and salt from the bay. She felt both exhilarated and hollow. Dean brought 2 cups of hot chocolate, setting one before her. "You did well," he said. "I feel like I'm playing with fire," she whispered. "What if it burns me too?" Dean sat beside her close enough that their shoulders brushed. Fire doesn't only destroy, it also forges, melts the old into something more substantial. She turned her head, meeting his gaze. For a heartbeat, the air shifted, something unspoken sparking between them. Clara looked away, first her pulse racing. She wasn't ready. Not yet. But the warmth of his presence lingered steady as the city below. Days passed, each one peeling back another layer of deceit. Clara's anonymous source sent more files. Dean helped her trace timelines, verify names, and confirm dates. One evening, Clara received a video. She watched with trembling hands, Lindsay at a private party, drunk. Her laughter edged with cruelty as she mocked Clara's artwork, mocked her miscarriage, mocked the life she had lost. Clara's nails dug into her palms. The video played repeatedly until Dean gently took the phone from her. "You can't let it consume you," he said. "It already has," she whispered. But in her eyes, there was no despair this time, only a cold, focused fire. Late one night, Clara turned to Dean as they pored over documents. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked. "Why stay? You don't owe me anything." Dean's jaw tightened. "Because you deserve someone who won't leave when it gets hard. Because I see you, Clara. The real you." Her breath caught. The room seemed smaller, closer. She wanted to reach for him, to let herself fall into the steadiness he offered. But fear held her back. Instead, she whispered, "Don't make promises you can't keep." Dean leaned closer, his voice a vow. "I don't break promises." The next family gathering was a birthday celebration for Clara's aunt. The room buzzed with chatter, laughter, and the clink of glasses. But Clara was calm, almost serene. When it was her turn to speak, she rose, holding a second envelope. She placed it on the table, her eyes never leaving Lindsay. This, she said, is who you've all chosen over me. Gasps filled the room as photos and messages spread Lindsay with yet another man dates overlapping lies, unraveling. The whispers grew louder, accusations sharper. Gilbert tried to intervene, but the tide drowned his voice. The family's adoration for Lindsay cracked for the first time, their eyes suspiciously turning toward her. Clara stood still, her face calm. Inside, her heart pounded with both dread and triumph. The storm had begun. Back home, Clara sank onto the couch, her hands trembling. Dean sat beside her, his presence warm, his gaze unwavering. "You did it," he said softly. Clara shook her head. "No, this is just the beginning." She leaned back, staring at the ceiling, the taste of victory bitter on her tongue. She had won a battle, but the war was far from over, and deep down she knew the next strike would decide everything. Seattle's sky was uncharacteristically clear, as though the city anticipated a different storm. Clara stood before her easel brush in hand, but she wasn't painting. Her strokes had stilled days ago. Now her studio was littered with half-finished canvases, fragments of children's laughter, glimpses of faceless women, all eclipsed by shadows. On the desk behind her lay folders, photographs, and letters spread out like ammunition. Dean entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He set one beside her, his gaze sweeping across the evidence chaos. "You're not painting anymore," he observed softly. Clara's lips curved faintly bitterly. "I am just not with colors." She gestured to the desk. "This is my canvas now." Dean studied her closely. "Are you ready for what comes next?" "No," Clara admitted. "But if I wait until I am, I'll never move." She turned to him, her eyes sharp of fire beneath their sorrow. "They've taken my voice long enough. Tonight I speak." Dean hesitated. "You mean at your aunt's gala?" "Yes." Clara's voice was steady. "The entire community will be there. My parents, Gilbert, Lindsay, everyone who believed their lies. And I'll show them the truth." Dean exhaled slowly. "Then let me stand with you." Her gaze softened, lingering on him. For a moment, she almost said what pulsed beneath her chest. Instead, she nodded. "Stay close. Not for me. For the truth." The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, the scent of roses, and expensive perfume, thick in the air. Clara stepped inside, every eye turning as though she were an uninvited shadow. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back. Nothing flashy, nothing to distract from the storm she carried in her hands, a folder tucked beneath her arm. Her parents stiffened when they saw her. Pearl whispered sharply to Lester, her disapproval palpable, even across the room. Gilbert stood by the bar, his tie loosened, glass in hand. Lindsay beside him, glowing in emerald silk, her hand resting on her stomach, like a queen displaying her crown. Clara's pulse roared in her ears. But then from the corner of the room, she caught Dean's gaze. A slight nod, steady as always. She breathed. She stepped forward. When it was time for speeches, Clara's aunt welcomed guests, her voice warm. Applause followed. Laughter, the usual performance of family unity. Then Clara moved to the stage. Whispers rose instantly. Why was she here? Why now? Clara placed the folder on the podium, her fingers steady, her voice carried clear and calm. I've been silent for too long. Tonight I will no longer be invisible. Eyes darted, confusion rippling. Lindsay's smile froze. Gilbert's jaw tightened. Clara opened the folder, pulling out photographs one by one, holding them high for all to see. This is the woman you called your pride. This is the man you said I should be grateful for. This, she placed a photo of Gilbert and Lindsay together, is what destroyed my marriage. And my child. Gasps. Murmurs. Some hands flew to mouths. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Lindsay rose her voice shrill. "This is fabricated. She's unstable." But the crowd had already seen too much, too real, too detailed. And Clara for once did not falter. The room erupted. Women confronted their husbands' names from the photos echoing in accusations. Friends turned away from Lindsay, whispers cutting like knives. Gilbert tried to step forward, but was met with anger, curses, and humiliation. The mask he wore so carefully slipped, revealing desperation. Pearl and Lester sat frozen, their faces pale. The weight of their misplaced loyalty hung heavy in the air. And Clara stood in the storm's center, her heart pounding not from fear, but from release. She had given her pain a voice. She had returned shame to its rightful owners. Dean was suddenly beside her, shielding her, as chaos swirled. His hand brushed hers, a subtle anchor. "You did it," he murmured. Clara's throat tightened. "Not yet. This is only the beginning." They slipped out into the cool night air, the roar of scandal echoing behind them. Clara leaned against the stone wall, her chest rising and falling. "I should feel relief," she whispered. "But all I think is empty." Dean handed her his jacket, draping it over her shoulders. "That's because this was never just about revenge. It's about taking yourself back." She looked up at him, eyes glistening. "And what if I don't know who I am anymore?" Dean's gaze was unwavering. "Then we'll find her. Together." The sincerity in his voice cracked something inside her. She had been holding herself rigid, armored against the world. But here was someone who did not demand, did not dismiss, only saw. Without thinking, Clara reached for his hand. Their fingers intertwined, tentative yet confident. Later, in the quiet of her apartment, Clara sat on the floor, the evidence folder now closed. Dean sat across from her, the glow of the city outside framing his profile. She broke the silence first. "When Gilbert first betrayed me, I thought I'd never breathe again. But tonight, I felt something else. I felt strong for the first time in years." Dean leaned forward. "That strength has always been in you. He just tried to bury it." Her voice softened. "And you? Why do you stay? Why risk yourself for me?" He held her gaze, his eyes steady, his voice unflinching. "Because somewhere along the way, helping you stopped being about justice. It became about you. Just you." Clara's breath caught. The words hung between them, fragile and dangerous. "I can't," she began. "You don't have to." Dean interrupted gently. "Not yet. But know this. Whatever storm comes next, you won't face it alone." Her heart trembled. For the first time since her world collapsed, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, love could bloom again from ashes. The next morning, Clara's phone buzzed, a new message from an anonymous number. "Well done. But you've only peeled the first layer. If you want to eradicate them, meet me again. This time, come ready." Clara stared at the screen, pulse quickening. She glanced at Dean, who stood on her balcony sipping coffee, the morning sun casting gold against his silhouette. For a moment, she considered keeping the message to herself. This path was hers, her vengeance, her burden. But then she remembered his words. "You won't face it alone." She rose, walking to him, her phone trembling in her hand. "There's more," she said. Dean turned, his eyes narrowing but steady. "Then let's finish what we started." The scandal spread through Seattle like wildfire. By morning, newspapers carried headlines about society betrayals, blogs whispered about Lindsay's secret life, and social media devoured every leaked photo. Clara watched it unfold from her balcony, the city alive with gossip. She should have felt triumph instead. An unease gnawed at her. Dean joined her with 2 mugs of coffee. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. It's begun. But remember, Clara, storms don't only destroy them. They can hit you too. Clara's grip tightened on the railing. Let them try. I've been burned already. What else can they take from me? Dean didn't answer. He set the coffee in her hands, grounding her with quiet steadiness. That afternoon, Gilbert called. His voice was harsh, stripped of its polished veneer. Clara, what the hell have you done? She almost laughed, exposing the truth. Isn't that what you always said? You valued honesty? You've ruined everything, Gilbert hissed. My job is on the line. Lindsay's contracts are collapsing, and my parents are demanding answers. Do you realize what you've started? Started. Clara repeated, her voice calm as steel. No, Gilbert. This was your ending. I'm just the one holding up the mirror. A pause. Then his voice turned venomous. You'll regret this. You've made yourself my enemy. The line clicked dead. Clara stared at the silent phone, her pulse steady. For the first time, his threats no longer made her tremble. That evening, Clara again met the anonymous contact in a quiet bookstore on Capitol Hill. The man, always half hidden, slid another envelope across the table. This one, he murmured, will finish them. Inside were financial records, transactions between Lindsay Gilbert and several influential figures. Bribes, hush money, and fraudulent deals. It was bigger than infidelity now. It was corruption. Clara's breath caught. If this gets out, they won't just lose their reputations, the man said. They'll lose everything. His eyes glinted, unreadable. The question is, are you willing to go that far? Clara hesitated. For a heartbeat, she saw her parents' faces, her childhood home, the remnants of the family she had once begged to belong to. Then she remembered the hospital room, the silence where her child should have been. She closed the envelope firmly. Yes. Back at her apartment, Dean studied the documents with a furrowed brow. This isn't just a scandal anymore, Clara. This is criminal. If you leak this, Gilbert won't just lose his job, he could face charges. And Lindsay, she'll drag everyone down with her. Good, Clara said softly. Dean looked at her, his jaw tight. Are you ready to live with that weight? Justice is one thing. Destruction is another. Clara met his gaze, her eyes glistening but firm. They destroyed me, Dean. Maybe I can't get my baby back, but I can make sure they never hurt anyone else. For a long moment, he was silent. Then he reached across the table, covering her hand with his. Then I'll stand with you, even if the world turns against us. Her heart clenched. The warmth of his hand and the vow in his voice were the first time she felt more than anger in months. She felt seen. The retaliation came sooner than expected. 2 nights later, Clara returned home to find her studio ransacked. Paintings, torn canvases, slashed photographs scattered. Her brushes lay broken across the floor. A message was scrawled across the largest canvas in black spray paint. Stay silent, or next time it's not your art we break. Clara's knees buckled. Dean caught her before she fell, his arms strong around her. They're desperate, he murmured, which means you're winning. But Clara's voice trembled. Dean, what if they're right? What if I lose everything again? He lifted her chin, his eyes fierce. You've already lost the worst, and you're still standing. That makes you unstoppable. That night, Dean stayed, refusing to leave her alone. They sat together on the floor of her ruined studio, surrounded by fragments of color and shattered dreams. Clara whispered, "This was supposed to be my sanctuary. Now it's just another battlefield." Dean turned to her, his voice gentle. "Then we'll build you another. Stronger. Untouchable." She looked at him, her defenses crumbling. "Why do you believe in me so much? Because I've watched you walk through hell and not collapse. Because you still fight. And because—" his voice faltered, then steadied. "Because I love you." The words hung between them, fragile and electric. Clara's breath caught her heart racing. For the first time, she didn't push the feeling away. She leaned in, resting her forehead against his, her whisper trembling. "Dean." They stayed there. No kiss, no rush. Just the raw, unspoken promise of something real in the ruins. The next morning, the financial records leaked. Clara hadn't done it, someone else had moved faster. Perhaps the anonymous ally, possibly another enemy. But the effect was immediate. Gilbert's company suspended him pending investigation. Lindsay's agency dropped her overnight. Reporters swarmed their home cameras, flashing questions shouted. And Pearl and Lester. They were caught in the humiliation, their voices, once so sure, now silenced by shame. Clara watched the news unfold on her television. Her heart, a storm of satisfaction and sorrow. Dean sat beside her, his hand brushing hers. "It's happening, Clara. The empire they built on lies is crumbling." Clara's lips curved faintly, but her eyes were wet. "Then why do I still feel so heavy?" Dean didn't answer. He pulled her close, letting her lean into him, as the city outside roared with scandal. That night, Clara's phone buzzed again. A new message from the anonymous number. "Be careful. They're desperate. And desperate people don't just fight back, they destroy." Clara stared at the screen, dread creeping into her chest. She turned to Dean, who was already watching her, his jaw clenched. "What now?" she whispered. Dean's hand found hers, steady as stone. "Now we prepare for their last strike, because they won't go quietly." And Clara knew that this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was survival. The city no longer whispered, it screamed. News anchors spoke Gilbert's name with disdain. Lindsay's face flashed across every headline, and the word scandal had become their surname. Clara sat in her apartment, curtains half drawn, the television muted. She didn't need sound. The images spoke enough. Reporters swarmed outside Gilbert's office building, and Lindsay shoved cameras away outside the agency she once proudly paraded through. The empire of lies was crumbling, yet Clara's chest was tight. Victory had always seemed like freedom, but now it tasted like smoke. Dean entered, phone in hand, his face grim. "They're desperate," he said. "I just got word Gilbert's been calling around. He's looking for you." Clara's stomach turned. "For me?" Dean nodded. "He's not going down quietly." That evening, her grandmother called. Her voice trembled across the line. "Clara, honey, don't come here. Your father said Gilbert's been circling the house shouting about betrayal. Lindsay's with him. They look unhinged." Clara closed her eyes, a sharp ache in her chest. Even now, her parents entertained the chaos, allowing the traitors into their home. Grandma Clara whispered, "Stay inside. Don't open the door." Dean took the phone gently, his tone steady. "We'll handle this. Don't worry." When he hung up, Clara's hands trembled. "They're losing everything. They'll come for me." Dean placed a hand over hers. "Then we'll be ready." It came sooner than they expected. The pounding at Clara's apartment door shook the walls. She froze, heart hammering. Dean pulled her behind him, his voice low but commanding. "Stay here." He opened the door just enough to see. Gilbert stood there, eyes bloodshot, jaw tight. Lindsay clinging to his arm like a drowning woman. Clara Gilbert's voice boomed through the hallway. "Come out. We need to talk." Dean's shoulders squared. "You've done enough. Leave." Gilbert sneered. "Who the hell are you to stand in my way? This is between me and my wife." Clara stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "Ex-wife." The word hung like a blade. Gilbert's eyes darkened. You think you've won? Does exposing us make you better? You ruined me, Clara. You ruined us. Clara's chin lifted, her voice calm but sharp. No, Gilbert. You ruined yourself. I just stopped hiding it for you. Lindsay lunged forward, her eyes wild. You stole everything from me. My career, my future, that child I carried. Clara laughed, bitter and raw. That lie you carried. You fooled them all, Lindsay. But you couldn't fool the truth. Lindsay's mask cracked, her scream echoing down the hall. She raised her hand to strike, but Dean caught her wrist midair. His voice was cold. Don't. Gilbert shoved at him, rage boiling. The men collided, fists flying, the hallway exploding into chaos. Clara screamed, trying to pull them apart, but years of betrayal had forged fury in both. Finally, Dean pinned Gilbert against the wall, his breath sharp. Touch her again, and you'll wish scandal was the worst thing you faced. Gilbert sagged, panting, his bravado crumbling. Lindsay pulled him back, her face twisted with fury and fear. This isn't over. Gilbert spat, retreating. We'll drag you down with us. The slam of the stairwell door echoed long after they were gone. Clara collapsed onto the couch, her body trembling. Dean knelt before her, his hands steady on her arms. Are you hurt? He asked. She shook her head, tears spilling. No, I thought I was strong. But when he stood there, her voice cracked. I felt like that girl again, the one who begged to be chosen. I hate that. Dean's thumb brushed a tear from her cheek. Clara's strength isn't just about never breaking. It's standing back up when you do. Her gaze lifted to his, and for a moment the world narrowed. His presence, his steadiness, it was the only thing keeping her upright. She whispered, Why do you never leave? Dean's voice was quiet, raw. Because I couldn't. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being just someone I protect. You became the person I chose. Her breath caught, her heart trembling. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she leaned forward. Their lips met, not in passion, but in quiet acknowledgement of everything they had survived and had yet to face. The next day, the news escalated. Footage of Gilbert and Lindsay fighting outside a hotel splashed across screens. Their allies abandoned them. Contracts were canceled. Investigations deepened. Clara watched it all, a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. This wasn't just their end. It was the unraveling of the family that had once defined her. Pearl called, her voice frantic. Clara, you need to stop this madness. You're tearing us apart. Clara's voice was calm. No, Mother, I'm just no longer holding it together for you. The line went silent, then clicked dead. For the first time, Clara didn't cry. She let go. That evening, Dean found her on the balcony, the city's lights reflecting in her eyes. He slipped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. You did it, he whispered. They can't hurt you anymore. Clara's lips curved faintly. Maybe, but they're desperate. And desperate people. Her phone buzzed, cutting her off. Another message from the anonymous number. Be careful. They're cornered. And cornered animals bite hardest. Clara's breath stilled. She turned to Dean, her voice trembling but firm. It's not over. Not yet. Dean tightened his hold on her, his voice steady. Then we'll face the last strike together. And in her heart, Clara knew the final act was coming, and it would decide not only her freedom, but the shape of the life she was finally ready to build. The night before the hearing, Clara stood by her window, Seattle's skyline glittering in the distance. The city had become both her battlefield and her rebirth. Every light seemed to whisper of the lives she had touched, the lies she had broken, and the truth she was ready to claim. Dean entered quietly, his presence as natural as breath. He carried no papers, no warnings, just a simple scarf in his hands. He said it'll be cold tomorrow, wrapping it gently around her neck. Clara smiled, faintly, fingers brushing his. "Do you ever stop protecting me?" He met her gaze steady. "Not when it's you." The courthouse was a hive of whispers. Reporters crowded the steps, cameras flashing as Clara and Dean walked side by side. For once, Clara did not lower her head. She let the lenses capture her, not as a victim, but as a woman, standing tall in her own truth. Inside, Gilbert sat at the defendant's table. His suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow. Lindsay was beside him, makeup thick enough to mask her exhaustion, but not the fear in her eyes. Their empire had collapsed, but they clung to each other like survivors on a sinking ship. Clara took her seat, the air tense. The judge entered, files stacked high with evidence. The proceedings unfolded: financial fraud, false claims, and perjury. The photographs, the records, the testimonies, each piece, a stone in the wall of justice Clara had built. When the judge finally spoke, his words echoed like a bell. "The court finds sufficient grounds for annulment. Gilbert Sanders, your claims are null. Lindsay Johnson, your contracts with fraudulent representation are terminated. Both of you face charges pending further investigation." Gasps filled the room. Lindsay clutched Gilbert's arm, tears streaking her mascara. Gilbert only lowered his head, defeated. Clara exhaled, the weight of years lifting from her chest. Outside, Pearl and Lester waited. Their faces were pale, their eyes pleading. Clara Pearl began, her voice trembling. "We didn't know it would go this far. We never meant." Clara raised a hand, her voice calm. "You never meant to listen. You never meant to believe me. And in that silence, you chose them over me. That was enough." Lester reached out, his voice hoarse. "We're still your parents." Clara stepped back. "Parents protect. Parents believe. You gave that role away when you handed me to wolves." Her words cut, but there was no anger left. Only truth. She turned away, Dean's hand steady at her back. For the first time, Clara walked without looking over her shoulder. That evening, Clara returned to her studio. The walls still bore scars from the night of the break-in, but the space no longer felt broken. She stood before a blank canvas, brush poised. Dean entered, carrying 2 glasses of wine. "What will you paint?" he asked. Clara smiled, dipping her brush into gold. "Not what I lost, what I found." She painted not flames, not shadows, but dawn, a woman standing at the edge of light, unafraid of what lay beyond. Dean watched, awe softening his features. "It's you." Clara's heart warmed. "It's us." Later, as twilight fell, they sat on the balcony, glasses, empty, laughter soft between them. Clara turned to Dean, her voice low. "You said you loved me. You stood by me when no one else did. And I—" Her words faltered, but her eyes glistened with truth. "I love you too. Not because you saved me, but because you reminded me I was worth saving." Dean's breath caught his smile tender. He leaned forward, their lips meeting, not hesitant this time, but sure, steady, full of promise. The city roared below, but all Clara felt was the quiet triumph of a heart rebuilt. Weeks later, Clara's mural at the elementary school was unveiled. Children cheered as bright colors stretched across the gym walls, images of resilience, hope, and rebirth. At the center stood a woman painted in sweeping strokes of gold, her arms open to the light. Parents, teachers, and neighbors applauded. For once, Clara's name was spoken with pride, not pity. Dean stood among the crowd, his smile radiant. Clara's eyes met his, and she knew her story was no longer one of betrayal, but rebirth. On a quiet Sunday, Clara visited her grandmother. They sat in the garden sipping tea, the air fragrant with jasmine. "You've changed," her grandmother said softly. Clara smiled. "No, I just stopped hiding who I am." Her grandmother squeezed her hand. "And now you're free." Clara looked up at the sky, the clouds drifting gently apart. For the first time in years, she believed it. Clara's journey may have ended here, but her voice belongs to every woman who has ever been silenced, every heart that has ever been betrayed, and every soul that has had to rebuild from ashes. If you've ever found yourself in a situation like Clara's, remember this: you are not alone. You deserve to be loved, trusted, and to live a life that truly belongs to you. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can bring you more dramatic and inspiring journeys. Leave a comment. If it were you, would you choose revenge or let go and move forward?